Welcome to the Formission Podcast. I'm your host, David Kenty, and we're so glad you could join us today as we delve into the depths of Christian discipleship. Well, Formission is a discipleship initiative of the Pentecostal Assemblies of Newfoundland and Labrador. It is our hope that no matter where you're listening from, you can take this content that you've heard today and apply it to your local church context. So let's get to it. Well, welcome to today's Formission Podcast. I'm joined by Bruce Newman, who is the lead pastor at Bethesda Pentecostal Church, as well as Justin Parsons, who is the assistant pastor at Bethesda Pentecostal Church. How are you guys doing today?
We're doing great.
Yeah. I'm sorry about clapping. I'm so excited.
That's okay. Excitement's a good thing. Is the weather something to be excited about down there?
Absolutely, man. It's like really nice out today.
It's a great thing to be excited about it when the weather's good.
Yeah.
Which is once a year, so.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, we want to talk to you today a little bit about some of the things that you're doing in your community. And particularly right now with Formission, we're talking about the Formission adventure and facilitating needs outside the church and the surrounding community during the Christmas season. And you guys recently did something called a Night of Generosity. Perhaps one of you guys wants to explain a little bit more about what the Night of Generosity was, how that idea developed, and some of the things the groups did.
Okay, first of all, it's the outreach piece of the church. It's really Justin's one of his roles here at Bethesda is outreach, so it's really his project. I'm just here to make him look good. So Justin, take it away.
Well, the Night of Generosity was something that came out of some conversation between, I guess, myself and Bruce originally when we were looking at just our calendar and looking ahead and kind of vision planning for the future and trying to keep in mind not just the inward focus of our church, but also what we're doing outside. And so we talked about the idea of having an evening or a night of generosity, and we kind of spelt it like generous city. Night of GENEROcity. We wanted to be generous in our city here in St. John. So we kind of took that idea and we kind of went with it, and we tied it in. We tied it in with a part of a larger series that we were doing on Sunday mornings in our church. Because in the fall, leading right up through the winter, we did a vision series, I guess, in our preaching. And so the latter part of that series was a part of our impact.
It was kind of I used this word very carefully. It was kind of an evolution of what we're doing all fall. Our very first series we did in September is kind of kick off, and we started with capture. And then we went into the second series in October, November, which was multiply, which we focus on our small groups discipleship, kind of kicking it off. And then our third one, which was from November to December, it was our third one.
Capture, multiply, transform.
Transform. Okay. So GENEROcity kind of fit well there. So that's kind of the evolution of it.
Yeah, and just seeing that verse in Acts 20:24. I know I've referred to this before, and I tied it in with the promotion of it, so to speak. And the Message version, Paul writes, says, "What matters most to me is to finish what God has started, the job that Master Jesus gave me of letting everyone know all about this incredibly extravagant generosity of God." And that paraphrase there of talking about the generosity of God and kind of tied in with the whole idea of having a night of generosity to reflect that exact thing. So
right on. And Justin, I think that's so part of the overall outreach and mission of the gospel is really to continue on what Jesus has started for us. And I think that's tremendous what you guys are doing there with regards to that. What were some of the things that you guys did throughout that GENEROcity mission?
Yeah, well, we wanted to have a number of opportunities so that anyone and everyone could get involved. We realized not everyone's going to want to do the same thing, and we wanted to give a number of options, I guess you could say. And so we pursued a number of things in the city that we thought might work out that didn't work out. But this is the framework we kind of use. We wanted to touch the seniors that are connected to our church, maybe some shut-ins that that don't get out as often as they would like, and feel disconnected in some ways. And we wanted to just remind them that we care about them and love them. And so we had a number of groups sign up and to go and actually visit seniors. And when they went to visit, they brought a gift from the church and just simply visited with them, prayed with them. Some groups stayed and sang some hymns and had just a great time of visiting some of our shut-ins and seniors. Secondly, we had an opportunity that we focused toward our young adults. And that opportunity was one downtown in our city. And we just had people sign up and arrange for vehicles to go down with young adults. And they brought coffee and muffins to anyone down on the streets downtown. They met a number of people and had some great conversations, and a hot drink and a warm smile kind of thing that night. So that was another opportunity. The third opportunity was actually we put out a plea, I guess, for people to bring baked goods, and because we had a plan for the baked goods, and we wanted to put together trays that we could then deliver on Monday or Tuesday to different groups in our area, organizations, schools. And so I was hoping, to be honest, for maybe enough baked goods to make maybe 10 trays.
Yeah.
That was kind of my goal in my head. People responded in such an incredible way that we had over 35 of these massive trays of goods that were put together. And so we had 35 trays then to go into the city, and we took those to two fire departments, 2 police stations, I don't know how many schools, places like the Association for New Canadians, where we have a relationship there, our McMorran Community Center, Wedgwood Park Rec Center, Single Parent Association office, Ronald McDonald House office, you name it. There were so many groups that we were able to connect with through that. Not only did another part of that opportunity was to get our children involved. And our children were actually doing a Sunday evening program called J12, which is a discipleship program. Yeah. And as a part of that, Pastor Angela, our children's pastor, arranged it so that the kids would make thank you cards to go along with the trays.
Yeah.
And so they just got around tables and started making thank you cards, some specific to firemen, some general, some for teachers, Yeah. And so we paired every tray with card or cards to those places, and that's put such a special touch there as well. Again, got kids involved, right? And so the final opportunity that we kind of announced was that anyone else that would maybe just come through the doors that might not have known about it, we wanted to have something happening at the church in case someone showed up and wanted to be a part of what was happening. So what we did, we had an Operation Christmas Child shoebox packing party, and that happened in the foyer of our church. Pastor Jerry kind of oversaw that opportunity, and we had supplies that were donated, and the church invested in some extra supplies. And what we did is any shoeboxes that were packed that night went toward a special Ukraine-specific project.
Oh, wow, yeah.
CC was pushing that these were designated to go to Ukraine. Yeah. And so we pushed that, and that night 55 additional shoeboxes were packaged and got ready to be sent.
Oh, that's incredible.
And so that was what we planned. What we didn't plan was another group showed up with some furniture, and we had some furniture at the church, and they showed up with a truck and started delivering furniture to some people that we knew of that didn't have anything in their apartments. Oh, wow. And so that turned into another opportunity that wasn't planned, but yet came out of this evening as well. So
that's wonderful. That's crazy. I mean, that people would just come out of nowhere, out of the woodwork with furniture for people, and which kind of leads to the next question. What was the response? You had the furniture go out, you had the baked goods, and you talked about, the kids doing these things and visiting the shut-ins. What was the response from the people that you guys were ministering to through this night?
Well, I look at that in two ways. The response to the people on the other end of the gift, I guess, and also the response of the church congregation in terms of their involvement, which I think Justin covered. It was on a Sunday night, so it was unconventional. Yeah. It wasn't a Sunday night service. It was, we're coming out to give not to the church, but to the community. So that's always my filter when I'm standing around these events. I'm looking around, and particularly on this night, I looked around like, wow. Yeah. You felt like you took outreach to another level. And, you're talking from 5-year-olds to 75-year-olds engaged. We literally doubled our numbers Sunday night with this project. And so, I'm looking at it from that perspective, the engagement from those inside the church, with the whole discipleship piece, right?
Yeah.
The fruit of, but also the second part is, to answer your question, is how the community responded to that. And I had the opportunity to be a part of it in terms of dropping off the cookies to different areas around the city. And pretty common to us was obviously a bit of a shock coming from the church. Another thing that not surprised me, I suppose, that kind of solidified it for me was hearing the stories from other people who dropped stuff off, was that they knew about Bethesda. Yeah. That's one of the things that we loved hearing, that they knew about the church, knew about what we were doing. Another common was that we heard that people knew that we were involved in international ministry at Bethesda, things like that. But the general response was gratitude and thanksgiving, thanks for it, and just we raised a profile of the church in the community, which was what our goal was, to get out there and raise that, right?
Yeah, and was there and you talked a little bit about, this was on your Sunday evening. It was unconventional. I'm thinking of pastors out there who really want to do similar things, but they may have to face certain hurdles and they might feel discouraged. Is there any kind of encouragement? Because certainly you probably felt at one point, can we do this? Can we honestly go out and transform our Sunday nights? Is it going to be too unconventional that people just don't lock on board? How would you encourage people through your own experience into doing this?
Yeah, and that's a good point, because obviously everybody has a different context and have a different cultural language, depending on where you are. And of course, I can only speak to where I am and speak about my context. But I think there's some general principles that we could all use throughout that. One of the key things for us was we built up to it. As I just said earlier, we walked out of three series starting in September. This is something we planned in the spring of last year, so it wasn't just a knee-jerk reaction. We're kind of following a larger vision that we're kind of flowing with. And of course, it was the capture piece, and our tagline was, for the capture, was what captures your attention will determine your future. And then we walked into the multiply. What occupies your time will determine your growth, which is the discipleship piece. And of course, the last one, transform, where you invest your energy will determine your impact. So that's where we hit the whole outreach piece. Right. So for us, the event was work, but a lot of the work was done before it. So preparation is always the key, is leading people up to it, changing the language, getting people collectively and corporately on side, and then setting a target, and then getting and broaden your net so that you have all age groups involved. That was another key one for us. That we shot across. We aligned all of the ministries, from children right on to adults. And one of the things that we're trying to do here is we're trying to involve, when we do an outreach piece, we want the entire church to be involved in it, so that the youth ministry is not doing something different on a Friday night. They come aboard and we collaborate together, and that builds momentum. When you have children and teenagers, you get parents. You get the parents on board, and that's the key. So so it was a collaborative effort. It's something that started way before it, and we led into it. And I got to say, you always have expected outcomes, but we were blown away. We really were by it, and not just the numbers, but just the feeling and the momentum that was built throughout it.
Yeah, and you mentioned the intergenerational piece, and I think that's so important for the church. And we kind of went through a period of time where I think we really divvied up the generations, and you do your thing there in kids program, you do your thing there in youth, and we'll do our stuff as young adults. But you're really talking about an opportunity to engage all the generations.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And that takes a lot of work, because when you involve that generational piece, you have to find common ground for everybody. So that takes a lot of closed door conversations with your team, whether it's you and a youth pastor, whether it's 2 on staff or 10 on staff. It still requires that conversation and that togetherness, right?
Yeah, and team seems to be the operative word there. And when you think about staff positions, and same thing with the generational thing, you can kind of go off and do your own things, but what would be your advice to pastors who want to create more of that team environment when they're going into events like this?
Well, again, I can only speak about my experience, and I've had the opportunity to be on staff.
Yeah.
To obviously now to be the lead, but as I'm just repeating myself, get everybody in the room early enough so that you can have those conversations.
Yeah.
Whether it's you and a children's pastor and youth pastor, or whether it's, for my context, it's myself, it's my assistant pastor, it's my youth and young adults pastor, it's my children's pastor, and we just took on another children's pastor, and my connections pastor, which is Jerry Brinston.
Yeah.
So that takes a lot of work because you got a lot of voices in the room. But I think once you start funneling it down, you go in with the goal, of course, and you go in with your potential outcomes, and you just start hashing it out. And I tell you, it takes a lot of work, but at the end of the day, and this is the kind of thing you get, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's it. And I want to kind of talk a little more theologically, and I don't know which one of you wants to answer this one, but when we talk about, a generous city and the Formission adventure, one of the criticisms that might arise is, well, isn't this just sort of devolving into a social gospel where all we do is good works and the gospel message never gets out there? We're Pentecostals. We need to proclaim the good news. And what do we do? What do you guys think about that? Like, is that a real danger, or is this much more than just a social gospel?
I personally, this is, going back to that verse I mentioned earlier about the extravagant generosity of God. We as a church want to reflect that generosity. We want to reflect His love, His God, the compassion of God, and it not only builds bridges between the church and community when you begin to do that, but it strengthens the body. It's twofold. Bruce mentioned, it was for outreach, but it was also as a building block for your people to be discipled through it and to grow in that. And so this is not replacing the gospel. It's just strengthening it in my view. It's being that cold glass of water to someone. It's getting outside of the four walls and actually touching the community around you.
Yeah.
And so that's our angle on it. We just want to get, we want to impact, and you wouldn't be around Bethesda for very long before you heard that word impact. It's one of the three key words. We want to be people who are passionately engaged. Engage is a big word. We want to be people who are growing in Christ, and that's the whole discipleship piece. And then we want to be people who are impacting the world or impacting our community. And that's really the outreach arm and what our view is, And so it's much more than a social gospel, because in and through all of this, we make connections. The relationships that we strengthen through this one project alone, and other doors that have opened for the first time through this project alone, is incredible. Mm-hmm. And it opens doors for further relationship and further opportunities to share gospel with people.
And I think if you define what your events are for, is always important. We do events here at Bethesda that we call them bridge events or ministries, and they're just to, they're events that are there to just an introductory for people to just be in that context. We do a wild breakfast here. We did one just a little while, and there were 350 women there, and probably over 100 or more would never come to church. We call that a bridge program, a bridge ministry. It's, hey, here we are. We want to offer this to you. There's a gospel element to it. It's a small gospel element to it in terms of the verbal part of it, but it kind of bridges people from where they are, without church, into a setting that's comfortable for them. So that, we define it as that.
Yeah.
But I think anything that's not balanced is always dangerous.
Yeah.
If we're just doing social gospel, obviously that's very dangerous. But we try to take a holistic approach to it, and if it's a part of the larger picture, that's the strength in that. One of the things, just to kind of bridge into our small groups when we're talking about, I don't know if I'm getting ahead of you or not.
No, that's all right. That's all right.
One of the targets we're trying to hit is the whole small group piece is huge here. We're not quite there yet, but in terms of Giving it a balance. I think one of the approaches we're trying to take is a holistic approach with our small groups, so that when a person is sitting in a small group, they're getting discipleship for one, they're getting community, they're sitting in a community of people, and there's care there. There's pastoral care there. God forbid that not just a pastor be doing pastoral care. Yeah. So there's some pastoral care piece there, and they're doing a social gospel piece, which is an outreach piece. So I think when you take it from that perspective, I think with a holistic approach, there's more of a balance there. Mm-hmm. And of course, there's always the danger of just doing that. I believe that the gospel is preached. It has to be preached verbally. Yeah. You confess with your mouth. I believe that. But there's also scripture that that we can't forget in the New Testament that talks about a cold glass of water, Matthew 10:42, that you offer a cold glass of water in my name. There's not a lot of words there, but there's the power in that act of giving that glass of water and what's involved in that. So I think balance is important.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to when I was reading Acts 2 the other day. It talked about how it talked about the early church in one sentence. It had these two segments. The first segment was they had all things in common, and it talked about their generosity and sharing amongst each other. And then it was like comma, and then the next thing was that their numbers were being added to daily. And this whole process of holistic discipleship, of being generous, does also benefit the kingdom as well.
Well, I mean, I call it a beautiful mess. I mean, when you get a group of people together that are in community and they have the opportunity to care for each other, I mean, it just a combustion thing happens there, right? You're caring for each other. You understand each other. You feel comfortable. There's a trust element there. You're doing life together. You're in community. You're doing an outreach piece. I mean, it's nothing more powerful. And we have all kinds of testimony. There's some things we have to work on, but when I hear stories about small groups that are involved in those types of things, the social gospel piece, the care for the people that are in the group. I mean, it's powerful, and that's the book of Acts right there.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And I think we're seeing now this idea of small groups really start to take hold. And what kind of encouragement could you give for a church that is looking to delve into small groups, has maybe struggled with developing small groups in the past? Because there is a lot of that where people have tried to do it in the past and it just hasn't launched. And but we're all coming to this understanding that small groups is so vital to the health of our organization. What kind of encouragement could you give for somebody who's looking to start it again?
Yeah, it is very important, because you can come to a church and sit through a service and leave again and not connect with anyone or be challenged, or there's no accountability built into that. There's no and so small groups are so important. And because we've identified that, okay, so how do I get there? How do I? Yeah. We don't have groups, or maybe we did at one time and it failed. I'm afraid to do that because people say, "Oh, we've done that before." I've heard these things. But the thing is, it doesn't have to start big. We sometimes think we got to have everything in order, and start small. 3 guys in a room reading the Bible and studying together, that's a small group. Some people think we got to have a dozen ready to go and ready. Start where you are. Some ideas I know in a previous church that I was a part of, I had the opportunity to be a part of launching a small group program, and what we did is we actually launched it in conjunction with a preaching series. And so we did a sermon-based small group and encouraged people to meet during the week, and we gave handouts based on the sermon, and it created discussion. And so we tied it in with a church-wide emphasis. Yeah. Whether that's a church of 30 or a church of 500. You can do something like that. I mean, at the time we did the foundations of faith, or we call it the anchors of faith. Yeah. And we took our doctrines, of divine healing, of spirit baptism, and we preached those messages, and then our groups met and talked about it. Yeah. And it created such a cool energy within the church. And some of those groups, we only asked them to commit to the 5 or 6 weeks. Yeah. We didn't totally expect them to go for it right away. We just wanted to give them a taste of it. But when people started it and started to meet, they realized very quickly the value of that. And a lot of those groups, this was a couple of years ago, and a lot of those groups are still meeting today.
Wow.
Because they didn't want to end there.
Yeah.
So it just becomes a part of how can we resource the groups? How can we, because there's so many good resources out there. A leader or a facilitator doesn't need to feel the weight of having to develop a curriculum themselves. There are a lot of good tools that you can use to help that. So,
yeah, and I think that Justin just hit on one thing there. When you give people a way out, they are more prone to come on board. If you're asking a person to sign up for to lead a small group for 4 years, I mean, there's just no life, you know. Giving people a way out is important. And he just touched on sermon-based small groups, something that we're about to walk into with a church-wide campaign in March. We're going to do that. Just lowers the amount of preparation that's needed for a facilitator. You know, the facilitator is sitting in the congregation. In that sermon, the week coming is the exact same topic they're going to be speaking on. So they're listening to the message. They got the sermon-based Bible study in front of them while they're listening to the message. So they're almost preparing in the service Sunday morning for their small group coming up that week. And then they can use clips from the message in their small group that's available on our website, right? So you give people a way out, one, and also again, sermon-based small groups is always just an option. But we find that that's gaining some traction here because of the lack of preparation that's needed there, rather than. If you ask a person to do a small group based on Romans, I mean, you're just going to scare off 99.9% of the people, right?
Yeah.
Let's be honest. But there are options out there to help people. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, guys, thank you so much for your time and your insights. It's very much appreciated, and really hope best of luck to you guys as you continue to do these things and work out inside the community and engage with the people around you, and just really thanks for coming on board. Is there any last thing you guys want to say? Anything that you want to encourage people with, or?
I'll just say I appreciate what you're doing and what the fellowship's doing with this focus on discipleship, and it's such an important thing. And even these tools that we're creating as a fellowship, the podcast, the different things. Hopefully, it's a way to build that community among our fellowship, so that people don't feel alone, and that they'll help. So I just want to say thanks for what you're doing. To be a part of that is a great opportunity.
I repeat that as well. Also, if anybody that's listening have more questions about the idea of GENEROcity, they can contact myself, or even better, Justin, because really Justin's the guy behind the heart of it. So we're available for that.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, I'll take your thanks, and thanks for the encouragement, and again, thanks for coming on the show. So we'll see you around.
Yeah, thank you.
See you, buddy.
Yep.
Thank you for joining our podcast today. If you've enjoyed our content, you can subscribe to the podcast by clicking the subscribe button in iTunes. If you're looking for more information about Formission, or want more tools to better facilitate discipleship in your own church community, you can go to our website at www.formission.org. Hope to see you back next week.